Randy Orton is supposed to be the villain of SmackDown right now, and WWE is trying very hard to make that clear. The entrance hits harder, the promos are darker, the attacks are nastier. And the message is obvious. Randy Orton has snapped. The only problem is the crowd is not treating him like a villain at all. They are cheering him like he is the most compelling man on the show. And that strange disconnect ended up becoming the story of the entire night. Because this episode had a lot going on. Cody Rhodes finally came back looking for payback. Sami Zayn went from being left off the WrestleMania card to becoming United States champion on the same freaking night. Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu pushed their feud into an unsanctioned territory, but more than anything else, this show felt like WWE trying to tell us one story while the audience was clearly feeling something else. Welcome back to the Tea Drop, Strong Brew, No Soft Behavior. We're getting into this SmackDown talk, and what can seem to be one of the most off shows so far on the road to WrestleMania. Craziness as always, but disconnect that has people scratching their heads to a weird ass point. I don't know. Like, it was a weird SmackDown. Still, some things are off, but anyway, let's get to it. I said this was one of those SmackDowns where a lot of things were happening. There was a lot of things technically that happened, but not all of it felt equally important. Some of it felt big, some of it felt like just filler wearing WrestleMania cheap makeup. And some of it felt like WWE was actively arguing with the crowd and losing the debate in real time. Still, there were some real developments here. Sami Zayn found his way back into the relevance in a major way. Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu got the exact kind of stipulation their feud needed. Cody Rhodes finally returned to get his hands on Randy Orton. And Randy himself somehow managed to act like a full-blown heel while still getting treated like the coolest guy in the building. So, let's get to it. We start with Randy Orton, as always, playing the heel, but the crowd, as obvious, not cooperating with what he wants you to do. SmackDown opened in Pittsburgh with commentary reminding us that WrestleMania is only 22 days away. WWE wasted no time showing us a dramatic recap of Randy Orton's actions from last week, complete with ominous music and all the presentation cues that were clearly meant to tell the audience this man has gone too far. Then Randy walks out live and got cheered like a returning hero. This is the core problem with the story right now. Randy is not missing his part. He is doing the work he was supposed to do. He's leaning into the darkness, speaking like a man who has stopped trying to be reasonable and carrying himself like someone who is truly comfortable being feared. The crowd just is not interested in fearing him. They're enjoying him in this way so much. Nostalgia, guys. We're getting hit with a 2009 level Randy Orton, and people are loving it. So yeah, you're going to get cheers. Andy talked about how Cody Rhodes telling him to become the best version of himself and telling him to listen to the voices in his head. Similar statement delivered in a different week. He said for a long time he ignored those voices because he was thinking about legacy and about winning a 15th world title. But now he is listening again. WWE wants that to sound like a warning, but the crowd is hearing it like a promise. Then Matt Cardona came out with the injured arm, blasted Randy with the microphone instead of talking like he was supposed to with it, and called him into the ring for a fight. On paper, that should have made Cardona the obvious sympathetic figure. Instead, it mostly felt like the audience was waiting for Randy to get his revenge. That is not a small detail. If the audience refuses to emotionally line up with the role WWE is assigning Randy, then the whole structure of the feud starts to feel off even after 1 week or two. Maybe they thought it was going to happen, like the shift will change after last week, but it's still going. But we're continuing. Sami Zayn is another key thing on this episode. He got desperate, and that made him interesting again, I guess. One of the better threads, as I said, running through this whole show was Sami Zayn. Backstage, Trick Williams got himself a WrestleMania opportunity from Nick Aldis. What exactly it wasn't told to him yet. Then Sami came over, asked about his own WrestleMania situation, and found out he did not currently have a spot on the card. The segment worked, and that statement worked because Sami did not come off annoyed so much as stunned after all these years. It felt like he suddenly realized the biggest show of the year might happen without him unless he forced something to change. Trick, in the meantime, while all of this was happening in his head, in Sami's head, he was rubbing it in. Sami eventually punched him, and right there you had a simple but effective emotional direction for the rest of the night. What was hilarious, he told Sami, hey, catering's that way, or go back to catering. A little hit about those that don't get a spot. You just hang out at catering. Effective. But that gave direction for Sami, like I said, for the rest of the night. Later that night, or later after this, Carmelo Hayes came out for the United States title open challenge. And Sami was the one that answered it this week. That instantly made the match feel bigger than just a random TV title defense, because Sami was not wrestling for a nice opportunity. He was wrestling because he was desperate not to be left behind. He would hope as a champ he would definitely get a better guarantee for a match at WrestleMania. The match itself was good. Hayes looked sharp as always, Sami brought urgency, the near fall landed well enough, and the crowd stayed with them down the stretch of this match. Then Trick Williams got involved, but even though with that, the Finnish title came into chaos, but eventually, out of all that, Sami won the United States Championship. And honestly, that worked out. Because now, Sami needed something. He needed it. So he needed stakes, he needed tension, and that pushed him to the point that he felt like a man who was willing to get a little messy if that was what it took to keep himself relevant. Now he has the title. And all this quickly made the WrestleMania match official after what he saw. Sami Zayn will defend the United States Championship against Trick Williams. Now, it would have been nicer, instead they also added Carmelo Hayes and made it a triple threat match. We still have time for that, but there has to be a reason behind that. Besides the fact that he was past champ and he should have an end too. This whole situation gives Sami direction. It gives Trick a clear target for the next couple weeks and gives WrestleMania a match with some built-in tension that's been developing slowly throughout the weeks. The only downside, as I said, is that Carmelo Hayes suddenly feels like the one left behind without a lane towards WrestleMania. We got next the women's tag division, yet it still feels crowded without feeling hot. We got the Bella Twins going against Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, with Nia Jax and Lash Legend hovered around the whole thing. And later in this match, Bayley and Lyra Valkyria gets involved as well. The result of this match, or just the segment, was that a lot of moving parts were happening, but in honestly not real momentum. The match itself never really clicked. There were some rough moments, the chemistry was inconsistent, and it went longer than the material really justified. The Bellas still bring the name value, but once the match started, that can only carry things so far. They were okay for people that were out for a while, but still, it's them against a new era of women wrestlers. Regardless, Charlotte and Alexa still do not feel like a truly natural pairing either. And Nia with Lash had presence, but the act still feels more assembled than fully alive. Then the Bellas got the win through outside nonsense, and naturally we get another post-match pileup. This is the kind of issue with this whole part of the show right now. It feels busy, but not really focused. There are names in this situation. There's some movement. There's obviously bodies everywhere, but there is no real emotional center holding it together. WrestleMania season is when stories are supposed to tighten up and lead to an epic conclusion if possible. Yet, this still feels like it is expanding sideways instead of going forward. We will see what happens on Monday when Bayley and Lyra have their tag match, and maybe chances are after that, they're going to set something up for WrestleMania. What exactly, we will find out. Probably a fatal four-way. Rhea Ripley in this SmackDown match still feels the most complete person in this whole feud. And let me tell you why. We moved into the Rhea Ripley, Jay Cargill, B. Fab, and Mitchin segment. And once again, the idea sounded better than the execution. Rhea came out and did her part. She has presence. She talks with authority as she always does as mommy. And she still feels like the most polished presence in this entire story. Jade came out with B-Fab and Mitchin being all heels and whatever, doing their heel moments, cursing out the crowd, whatever. But once that talking started, the segment lost a lot of its energy. Jade still does not feel fully comfortable in these longer talking momentums. B-Fab did not add much, and while Mitchin at least tried to ground her side of the story in frustration over being overlooked, the alignment still did not fully click. Then the match with B-Fab was really more of an angle than a match. Rhea controlled things, outside interference happened, Jade got involved, the referee called for the DQ, and then the numbers game left Ripley laid out again. So once again, Rhea was the one carrying the segment. That is the bigger issue here. Rhea feels fully formed. Jade looks like a star, but the presentation is still not consistently bringing the best version of her to the surface when the talking starts. Until that changes, these segments are going to keep feeling like Rhea is doing the heavy lifting while everybody else is still trying to find the exact right lane. Anyway, in the back, Kit Wilson talks with a, I guess, problematic Miz who somehow can't handle the curse that seems to be attached to him thanks to Danhausen. He eventually leaves, but here comes Danhausen to talk with Kit. Danhausen asks why Miz is mentoring Kit when he should be mentoring Danhausen. And Kit says it's because he's good looking while Danhausen looks like that. And Danhausen obviously doesn't take that respectfully, and he eventually just curses Kit.
You are guest!
Before we head to another commercial break. When we come back, obviously, we get the Jelly Roll versus the Kit Wilson. Now that happened, but that's obviously just about it. We get their match against each other, and I'm not going to overstate this one. It was not a great match, as we expect, but it also was not a disaster. Kit did his poetry routine. Jelly got the celebrity treatment, the crowd stayed engaged enough, and the match was laid out in the way that kept Jelly from having to do much. In that sense, it did exactly what it needed to do. Jelly Roll won, the audience reacted, and the show moved on. This was one of those WrestleMania season celebrity segment that exists in its own separate lane. It did not really hurt the show. It also did not really matter on the same level as the main stories. But by the end of the night, Jelly's real contribution to the episode turned out to be something else entirely. Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu finally got the right kind of match set up. Now, this was one of the better parts of the show. Drew McIntyre showed up looking wrecked after last week's chaos. He was bandaged, limping, and clearly still in pain. But he still carried himself like a man whose anger had outgrown his injuries. Later, Jacob Fatu came out looking just as damaged, talking about the blood, the cracked ribs, and the fact that Drew still had not been able to put him down. Fatu's promo worked because it sounded like him. It sounded like damage instead of performance. But then Drew answered him from the stage and made it personal in exactly the way this feud needed. He talked about Fatu taking from him, taking his title shot, taking his place, taking his future. And then he crossed the line with that line about Fatu's kids. It was cruel, direct, and exactly the kind of moment that makes a WrestleMania feud feel hateful instead of merely competitive. Nick Aldis came out and made the WrestleMania match official as an unsanctioned match. For the way this storyline is developing, it's the right call. These two do not need some elaborate gimmick. They needed a setting that tells the audience normal rules are no longer enough for what they are trying to do to each other. If they really commit to the violence, this could be one of the most memorable matches on the WrestleMania card. But we will find out and see. We get to Julia. Julia won this, but she still feels slightly misplaced on this brand. She goes against Tiffany Stratton, which should have felt bigger than it did. Instead, the crowd never really seemed to fully be invested in this match. The match itself was fine. It wasn't great, terrible either, just fine. There were some uneven spots, but Julia ultimately got the win after Kiana James distracted Tiffany long enough to help swing the finish. So on paper, Julia leaves the segment with momentum, but emotionally, it did not feel like momentum. That is the recurring issue with Julia on SmackDown right now. She does not feel untalented. She does not feel unimportant. she feels slightly misplaced. And it still feels like the larger ecosystem of the brand is not built in a way that naturally brings out the most compelling version of her. When that happens often enough, it stops feeling like a one off and starts feeling like a presentation's problem. We get to Randy Orton. Now, Randy Orton asked after the opening segment to Aldis to get a match between him and Cardona. And while all this was hesitant because, Matt Cardona was injured, it got pushed. He kept pressuring him, and the match made official. So that's what the main event is for that night on SmackDown. This is when the show finally caught fire. Randy Orton took on Matt Cardona, and this match was basically WWE asking the audience one more time to boo Randy while the crowd continued to refuse. Randy went after the injured arm immediately, obviously. He slammed it into everything he could find, ripped off the brace, tortured Cardona around ringside, and wrestled the match like a man trying to make the audience uncomfortable. The audience still stayed with him. That is what makes this story so strange. Randy is fully committed to the heel work. The crowd is just not interested in treating him like that. After Randy won, Cody Rhodes' bus arrived, and from there the show finally shifted into the kind of closing chaos it needed. Unfortunately, he showed up literally 5 seconds before the show ended, and as he was walking from his bus to the ring, we went into commercial, PIP style. Annoying. He should have showed up earlier, but he didn't. It's like just shove him in right at the last minute to make people stay to the very last minute of SmackDown. But anyway, Cody stormed through the back, pushed through security, and came to the ring looking like a man who was not interested in talking first. That was the right choice, though, story-wise. Cody and Randy brawled all over the place. They fought through security, fought through ringside, fought near the announcer's table, fought in the ring, got pulled apart, and then broke loose again. The typical, we're going to separate you guys into each separate corner, and then eventually one of you will break through and go jump on the other guy, and then you'll do it again, and then the other guy jumps to the other. Typical thing. I wish they did something new. Take them to the crowd. Drop one of them through a pile of tables. I don't know. Do something different. But doing this recurring thing, it was cute. It was good from my earliest recollection, when Undertaker did it to Brock Lesnar to set up the SummerSlam match a few years ago. But now we are using it like this is how you develop that feud hate towards two people. You can do it in other ways, guys. Just try it. Figure it out. You got a bunch of good writers, right? Try it. Same thing repeated. That's been repeated so many times. But the emotion underneath still worked, though. Cody was not there for a speech. He was there because Randy hurt him, and now he wanted his hands on Randy. Then came the ending. Jelly Roll came out, seemingly trying to calm things down, and Randy dropped him with an RKO. And the crowd cheered for that too. That final moment really summed up the entire show better than anything else. WWE keeps trying to tell us Randy Orton is the villain. The crowd keeps answering back that they do not really care. They are enjoying him anyways. So overall, this was a meaningful SmackDown, but not a great one. Not every part landed the way WWE probably wanted. Sami Zayn winning the United States title was probably the thing that mattered the most in that whole show. Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu getting the unsanctioned match was the right call for that type of feud. Some were thinking they were going to do a Hell in the Cell. Come on, guys. That's a feud ender. This feud just started, so they're going to start with something simpler. An unsanctioned match was the right call. Cody Rhodes coming back at the last minute, I guess, gave the main event scene some real energy again. But the biggest thing this episode revealed is that Randy Orton may not be too over for the story WWE is trying to tell. Because when a man is acting like a heel, talking like a heel, and brutalizing people like a heel, but the crowd is still treating him like the coolest guy in the building, eventually the company has to make a choice. Do they keep forcing the heel role, or do they accept what the audience is telling them in real time? And that is the real question coming out of this episode. Is Randy Orton actually the villain in this story anymore? Or is WWE fighting a battle with the crowd that it cannot win? With that question, you guys let me know in the comments what you think. And I will see you on the next video. Strong brew, no soft behavior. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will talk at the next Smack Talk. I'm out.